Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Wednesday's Wonder Why Lunch and Learn series. I'm your host, Tracy Sider, and we are going live, hopefully, to all the platforms. I will check in a minute once we hand over to our wonderful guest, Bonnie Wisener from Shift Nutrition and Wellness. So, Bonnie, how are you? Bonnie is going to be talking to us about perimenopause and menopause and irritable bowel syndrome and why it is so important to be our own health advocate. So before I introduce Bonnie properly, let me just tell you who I am and what are you doing here. I'm Tracy Sider. I am a pain relief and body shape coach for women over 40 who are done with their stiff, achy, stuck behind screens bodies and are ready to get in shape, feel pain-free, and age well. So you are in the right place if you want to crush your life and work goals and you need your body to get with the program. And I teach women how to look better, feel better, and age well in my 12-week online program called The Reshape Method. But we are joined today by Bonnie, who is going to be talking to us about gut health. So hello, Bonnie, let me hand over to you.
Hi, Trace. That was an amazing explanation of what you do. I love how you do that. And you do exactly what you just described. So loved hearing about that. Hi, everybody. I am really excited, actually, Trace and the group, to talk about this today, because I actually think this is a perspective that doesn't get discussed enough, frankly. The fact that, we're in, I'm not really so much talking about specifics around menopause and gut health today in terms of symptoms and symptom management. It's not going to be a how-to like that. A layer of perspective that I think is often, I'll say missing, but I guess what I mean overlooked, is the idea that we don't necessarily have enough confidence in or necessarily consistently advocate for ourselves. So that's a really important part of my client's healing journey. And so I think it's important to discuss how to do that, how to actually do that. Having said that, I do believe that anybody in your group or anybody who's in this audience today is in this group specifically because they're already on the path to self-discovery. So we have to recognize that. But many women are entering this stage of life and realizing that the status quo and the blank looks that we get from our doctors around health changes that happen specifically around peri or menopause age isn't good enough. And, hormone-induced weight gain and impaired digestion are just two obvious issues that we face at this stage of our life. But what's interesting is, and I've literally had this conversation with the doctors who I work with, and we've used this word to describe this umbrella, these two things. Menopause and IBS are literally thought of as medical quagmires, meaning that our doctors, again, this is general, don't really know how to best support or direct us because they don't really understand either issue terribly well, unfortunately. I believe, though, that the reason for this is because both of these things, and this is the fortunate part, are not actually medical issues, right? They're issues that reflect a change in function and, yes, to a degree, dysfunction, right? So in both cases, they're best resolved, I would say broadly. Certainly there are other supports and medications and supplements and things that people can layer into their treatment plans or their care plans, but really they're best resolved with diet and lifestyle modifications, which is really two big umbrellas that you and I both consider foundational, right? So here's where self-advocacy comes in. I believe that, and I'm going to cover today, there's lots of things we could do, but I'm going to cover three very important things that we need to do in order to address these issues and advocate for ourselves. One of them I'm going to cover is to find a plan and stick with it. The second is to be an advocate in your doctor's office, and I'm going to go into a lot of detail on that and how to do that best. And ultimately, to find the right support, right? To make sure that you're getting the right information, accountability support where that's necessary, and just the right support for you specifically. So going back to the basics, which is really having a plan and stick to it. The reason I want to cover that today is because frankly, a lot of the stuff we're talking about under both of these umbrellas, perimenopause, menopause, and the area I work in, which is really women who are affected by irritable bowel syndrome and dysfunctional digestion. These are issues that we question ourselves with because they're not black and white. They're very gray, right? The symptoms are gray. They come and go. They're multiple, and it's so multifactorial that I think that even when we look something up on Google, or even when we find the support that we think we're looking for, the informational support we're looking for, we start and we question it, right? Because transformation like this doesn't happen overnight. We're dealing with things that often take commitment and time. And so I really want to highlight that if this is something that you want to change for yourself, if you want to advocate the change for yourself, you really, really need to stick with it. You need to commit and stick with it. And this is, of course, in a busy life that we all lead, difficult because it involves part mindset and part grit, frankly, right? So we need to believe that we can actually in fact, make a difference. You need to take back your power. You need to basically just consistently keep slugging at it and doing the work, which Tracy, I know in a positive way is what the women in your program do. And I know that that's the benefit of consistently week after week committing to the type of program offering that I have as well. So often we're given advice and we're just seriously not sure if it's going to work, as I said. So if it's the right advice, or, we're not even sure if it's the right advice very often, or more importantly, I think this is how our brain works because we really don't love change that much, right? We're resistant to it specifically because it involves change. It involves change in longstanding habits. It involves change in perspective, which is also difficult sometimes. And again, we're going to cut ourselves a little slack because we're busy. This is a busy stage of life as well, right?
So
and
what are the main pieces of advice that you find that people are given?
In my world, like in
Yes.
the digestive health world,
yes,
typically it involves avoiding certain foods. And that was the paradigm for such a long time when we didn't have a lot of information. But the reality is that people with consistent or chronic digestive symptoms like bloating, constipation, diarrhea, these are things that some people have lived with their whole adult life, their whole life, in fact. But again, overlapping with the audience that we're talking to today, this is a very common onset thing or worsening thing at this stage of life. And if you just simply Google it, you typically will get, first and foremost, variations of elimination diets. And I think what I would want people to know about that is that this doesn't really lend itself to what I'm saying about the commitment to the process, but in a way it does. The reason people walk away from those things, first of all, after 2 weeks, let's say, or a week, is because they're not 100% sure. They don't have the guidance or the reassurance. They're not sure even what to look for when they do this type of thing. And so it becomes really understandably confusing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lack of commitment to the process, even that part of the process, even though I want to reinforce the idea, because you asked the question, that isn't the best thing that one can do. It's certainly not the only thing that someone can do to actually achieve results. And I think you can actually say this for hormonal balance as well. When it comes to dietary change or intervention, you must stick with it, but you also have to modify and observe what it actually is doing for you, because to an extent it's individualized, right? So I don't know if that answered your question, but basically, yes. I think it lends itself to the fact that we do kind of step in and step out because we're resistant to this type of change, right? These types of changes. But the fact is that the only thing that stimulates change is change. So we have to step into it wholeheartedly, even if it's like consistency over perfection. I'm not suggesting we always have to be perfect around these things, but we do have to do the work. So for example, again, the women that we both speak to and work with most frequently, right? You might be having trouble sleeping. This is a big issue. You suddenly find yourself, in perimenopause, up in the middle of the night, alert for no reason, unable. really unable to fall back asleep. We hear this so consistently. The reality is that this is actually easily explained through science. Our sleep-wake cycle will change during perimenopause because the hormones that control it are completely out of whack or falling out of whack and are very, very sensitive to fluctuation. So things like, just again, to use this as an example of what I'm talking about, decreased estrogen causes a spike in cortisol. Cortisol spikes decrease melatonin production. Melatonin is a hormone that's needed to have both quantity and quality of sleep, and it helps set our circadian rhythm, right? So you could be told this over and over again, and you can also be told that, for example, and don't throw things at me virtually, but caffeine, for example, is a stimulant, right? So as a stimulant, caffeine increases cortisol, similar to what sugar does. Sugar is also a stimulant. Yet, let's use both of those examples. And yet, as 3 p.m. hits, and you've been told this over and over, and that energy crash prevails because our cortisol cycle is out of whack, right? It's not supposed to be that low at that time of day. Many of us run for a quick caffeine or a sugar hit, and this only worsens the situation. Yet we continue to resist cutting back on or eliminating the things that we know might be worsening our situation. So I guess the headline is, it's not a blaming conversation. It's just to have confidence in the advice you're getting and your commitment to it. So be the change, okay? Then the second, I think this is so, so important for all of us to understand how to and why it's so important to advocate in our own doctor's offices. Many of us, I speak to women all the time who are basically convinced that this issue is not something that they need help with, specifically IBS, or convinced that nothing's wrong with them, which is worse. So let's just think back to, some experiences you've had with providers, whether it's your doctor, a therapist, whoever, a nutritionist, whoever, and think about how that experience went for you. And, likely you might have scheduled that appointment in advance. Maybe you waited a really long period of time, especially in the area of, if you're going to a gastroenterologist or a specialist, right? So you're a little nervous, but also kind of excited because you think, okay, I have this problem. I'm about to get a solution and go to, I'm going to a professional, I'm going to get my problem solved. And then when you get into the office, not only are you waiting there, but when you start having the conversation with the provider, you actually start to feel stuck. You may not feel heard. Maybe you felt like they talked over you, that they were rushed, that they dismissed you, that they didn't truly seem to listen to what you were saying. They might have, I hear this all the time, disregarded your symptoms as normal, blamed your bloating, for example, on your weight, said there's nothing that they could do. And maybe they suggest even, this is happening less and less in the world of digestive health, but oftentimes we're even kind of, and I think in menopause it's the same thing, suggested that it's all in our head. I actually have a client recently, menopause age client, who went to her OBGYN because she was having such severe issues around vaginal dryness. She hadn't had intercourse in over a year, not because, her desire was limited, but also because of her physical discomfort. She was being treated. Anyway, they were working out a treatment plan and all was sort of good, except she literally heard these words from her OBGYN. Well, you can't die from not having sex. There's quality of life issues.
Right.
She was stunned.
Horrifying.
Horrifying.
A medical professional would say that.
I know. And listen, I'm not saying that all doctors are like that, but I don't think that's the most uncommon reaction to things. Right. Because again, they're not really considered medical conditions to the degree we normally think of that, right? Mm-hmm. So all the while, you're talking to your doctor, they might be trying to help, but having limited input for certain things, certainly for IBS. Yet they're holding a prescription pad in their hand on the ready, or a list of over-the-counter laxatives as a proposed solution, those types of things. I have great respect for great healthcare providers. I'm fortunate in my life, I feel like I actually do have an excellent family doctor. In my world, because I have a history of Crohn's, I need to be connected to a gastroenterologist, and I feel that my gastroenterologist and I have a good relationship. That relationship wasn't always like that, though, and was actually nurtured and evolved on my end. And your doctor, your nutritionist, or other providers all have an important role to play, not just in the diagnosis and treatment of chronic issues, but in helping you through this. But here, I thought I would give some tips on how to ensure a better, more productive overall experience. So for example, something that we need to be cognizant of doing all the time, because these people are really busy, is come prepared. So have a list, all of the questions that you have for your doctor or your provider. Come to the appointment also with a list of everything that you want to review with them. So your symptoms, any key history issues that you want to bring up that they might not know if it's a new specialist or something like that. Basically anything that might be relevant. Do not let them rush you. They're actually there to help you. And we get intimidated in these environments. Many, many of us do. So, and we tend to feel rushed because they're always rushed. So when you're booking your appointment, you can even give the receptionist a heads up and just say, I have several, even if you're going in for like, I don't know, your periods are irregular and you just want to ask about that, or you're having a lot more cramping around your periods and whatever the case, you're bleeding a lot, whatever it is, there's usually still accompanying to that a list of things that might be bothering you or changing. Keep a list, let the receptionist know you have a few things you want to discuss, and make sure that you try to leave that appointment saying what you need to say and having all of your questions either answered or a commitment that they will be answered in follow-up. So, this is really, really important because as I said, we tend to get flustered. Oftentimes we go to the doctor not feeling well, having like foggy brain even, right? So if you're flustered and feeling well, another tip is to perhaps bring someone with you, either a spouse or a friend who can actually be there for you and help take notes or help keep you on track if it's that, if you're really not feeling well. And the other thing I wanted to say is patient advocacy isn't only important in our doctor's offices. Many of us feel that people in our personal lives even have a difficult time with our lack of dependability because, in my case, like with IBS, due to bathroom habits or schedules, or the fact that we can't predict when our off days are going to be, when we're going to be achy and joint achy from like perimenopausal symptoms or really lacking in energy, for example. And it almost becomes, it's not an illness, but it almost becomes like an invisible illness. Like we say these things, people who don't see it firsthand don't necessarily believe it. So I want us to also, as an advocate for ourselves, stand up and kind of don't be ashamed of it, own it to an extent. It is real and we need to take it seriously for ourselves. And if it's causing interruptions in our personal or our professional life, and we're not actively finding the solutions because of how other people in our life feel, right? Again, creating doubt, we're never going to be able to show up for our friends, for our partner, for our children, for our career in the way that we really know that we want to or we could, right? So it kind of stands in our way. So again, an addendum to the support component. And then, asking yourself, let's say you travel down all of those paths. You have a doctor who you're trying to get help from, and maybe you're not getting the extent of support that you want, or maybe you feel like that provider doesn't know enough about what it is you're looking for. So elevate the conversation, try and get referrals from the person who you trust, who hopefully is your doctor, and the question becomes, and I know so much time can pass because this has even happened to me, go to your doctor again. We in our society do have a certain level of respect and faith in the people we choose as care practitioners. So if they're not able to help us, I think we do fall prone to a bit of self-doubt. And before you know it, a year can pass before you move on to the next stage of looking for support. So the questions to ask are, how long can I actually live like this? Whatever this is it that uncomfortable? How long will I allow, these seemingly unpredictable symptoms to rule these parts of my life, my family, my social, my personal life? And ultimately, again, the self-advocacy part needs to be, what do I want? Do I want to continue to find a solution? And if so, am I going to go back and forth? How much time am I going to let pass? How am I going to get to the root of the issue? And so the third and final thing is, if you're not finding answers in places where you expect to find them, which does happen quite a lot, seek out the right type of support. If your doctor, for example, continues to be a dead end, as I said, find somebody else who has expertise in your area of need and invest your time and, if possible, your money into finding a solution, because there usually is a solution, especially when it comes to the diet and lifestyle pieces of things. It's just not always as straightforward as we would like it to be. And I want to also say, because I'm very sensitive to this, if money is an issue, particularly in Canada, we live in a lot of places actually in the world have social medicine, for example. And so seeking out other providers can be, hit our pocketbook or insurance policies or whatnot. So if money is an object, so many of us, at least to get on the path, offer so much free content specifically to make our information and service strengths accessible to you, like Tracy and I for sure both do. So don't accept the status quo. The status quo is going to leave you feeling worse and worse physically, and eventually will have quite a negative impact, potentially on our emotional health and on our well-being. So again, those are the ways that I think we can really advocate for ourselves. There's obviously many more, but those are the highlights that I just wanted to cover in this conversation. It starts up here. It starts with acquiring a mindset that suggests for yourself, I'm going to find a solution to this, and then relying on support and information around you and seeking it out to make sure that happens.
Thank you. That is such an important topic. Thank you so much for bringing it up, because yes, this is your health. You know what's going on in your body, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it is so easy to go into a medical appointment, feel unheard, and doubting yourself, right? Doubting yourself. So really going in there prepared, and being prepared to look elsewhere as well. And of course, being prepared to make the changes that need to be made, and sticking with that long enough to see the results, right?
Yeah.
So we have one question. Please feel free to drop your questions in the chat. If you're watching on the replay, either on YouTube, if you're on LinkedIn, pop your questions there, or if you're in the Facebook group, Moving and Reshaping Club, pop your questions there, and you can tag Bonnie. And Bonnie, will you come in and answer those questions? Amazing.
Absolutely.
We have one question so far. How do you deal with doctors dismissing things due to you being fat and getting actual treatment rather than just being told to lose weight?
Yeah.
Do you come across that a lot in people who come to you for, because you have a gut health program, correct? And maybe you can talk to us a little bit about that as well. But let's speak to this question first about doctors dismissing us, maybe because we are overweight.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. So I think that's a bias, flat out, right? It's just a bias. I mean, the whole conversation around weight, we know what the risks are in carrying more weight. But if you go to your doctor telling them that you can't sleep, for example, or I'm bloated and I'm constipated constantly, and they turn it into a weight conversation because you might be carrying a little extra weight, or your stomach is bloated, or you might have always carried extra weight, that's lame. There's no other answer for that. Unfortunately, the best defense is an offense. And I don't mean that in an aggressive sense, but I mean that sometimes one thing I didn't mention, and I think it answers this question, is our doctors might have information that they don't even know they can share with us. So turning that comment into a question, again, put it back in their lap and say to them, make them explain themselves, right? Because sometimes it's just an automatic response because that's what the paradigm of conversation and healthcare uses. So say to them, can you just explain to me, like, obviously I am interested in losing weight, or I feel quite comfortable with my weight actually at this stage of my life. I would like to know how that specifically connects to the fact that I'm having trouble sleeping, or how that specifically connects to the fact that I'm constipated. Like, what I'm saying is put more onus on them to make the connection for you, because again, that's one example, but sometimes if it's another example, they actually might have more information that contextualizes it and could be more helpful, but they didn't even know that they could provide it to you or that it made sense in that context. So I would say certainly, because that is a sensitive one. People are discouraged and feel poorly when a doctor turns it around to something like that, because you feel blamed also. And I think the onus, we're sitting there for their expertise. So if that's a road they want to go down, make them accountable to it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming to chat with us today, Bonnie. This has really been very important information for people to take forward, because at the end of the day, as I was saying, you know yourself, you know when something is off. And it's about having the self-trust and the self-advocacy. And then if you're not getting the answers that you want from your doctors, there are other people and other kinds of specialists. Just like you are a gut health specialist. So maybe tell people how they can get hold of you. You were saying you've got lots of free resources as well. How can people look into what you're doing and what you are offering?
Sure. So the easiest way, I guess, to access some of the free resources and information and support would be to come into a Facebook group that I have run for the last several years called Shift into Healthy Habits for Digestive Health. And maybe we could just drop a link because that's a bit of a mouthful. But you can reach me through my website, www.bonniewisener.com. I'm on Instagram under Shift Nutrition and Wellness. And I do run a digestive health program for people who struggle with chronic ongoing digestive issues like bloating, constipation, diarrhea, urgency, gas, IBS, called Shift Your Gut Therapy. And it also is a 12-week process that I bring people through to provide them with the tools on how to enhance their digestion and how to get it back up to optimal capacity in terms of function. So I have information in the group about that as well.
Amazing. Well, we will put those links below in the Moving and Reshaping Facebook group. Otherwise, as Bonnie said, you can find her at bonniewisener.com. Thank you so much, Bonnie. Bonnie is a regular on our Wonder Why Lunch and Learn series. So we look forward to having you with us again, and have a wonderful Wednesday.
Thanks, Tracy. Thanks for having me. It's always good to talk to you and your crew.
Awesome. Bye.